Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and welcome to my Thanksgiving 2022 NFL mock draft. I've been waiting to make my first mock draft of the 2021 NFL and college football season, and I thought doing it on Thanksgiving would be the perfect time. I love the NFL draft, and if you also love the NFL draft, this is definitely the channel for you, so make sure to subscribe for much more draft content as we get closer and closer to the 2022 NFL draft. Before I get into the draft, I just want to say that the draft order I'm using is my projected order for the rest of the season. I went through every game for the rest of the year and predicted the result, and used that as my draft order. If you don't like the draft order, just know that these are just my thoughts and they could end up being wrong. But I don't want to waste any more time than I have to, so let's get right into it with the first pick, where the Detroit Lions are on the clock. Even with the tie against the Steelers, the Lions are still winless, and I don't think they'll be getting their first win anytime soon. The Lions have needs pretty much everywhere on the football field, making this a bit of an interesting pick. In the usual year, this would probably be a quarterback due to the poor play of Jared Goff this season, but with this year's quarterback class being surprisingly weak, I don't believe that there's any quarterback that should go as early as number 1. With that being said, I just think this pick has to be Kayvon Thibodeaux from Oregon. Not only is Thibodeaux the best player in the class, he also fills a big hole on the outside of the defensive line for Detroit. Thibodeaux has just been a monster every time he's been on the field for Oregon, and even though his production hasn't been as great this year due to injury, he is still far and away the best player in the class. Thibodeaux is wildly athletic and has ridiculous speed and strength to go along with his 6'5", 250-pound frame. A dominant 9-sack freshman season, followed up by a solid sophomore year and a good start to the season this year, Thibodeaux is the unquestioned number 1 player in the class and should go, without a doubt, first overall. The Houston Texans are on the clock at pick number 2, and they haven't been much better than the Lions this year. They had that big Week 1 win against the Jaguars, but have been pretty awful ever since. While the Lions pick seems pretty straightforward for me, this one is a little bit more interesting. Quarterback is definitely an option, but like I said, this quarterback class is very weak, and the Texans just drafted Davis Mills last year. I know he's been pretty bad so far this season, but I think he still needs a little bit more time to prove himself. With Whitney Merciless being released a few weeks ago, edge rusher is a big need, and Michigan's Aiden Hutchinson has been a huge riser on draft boards this season, and I really like the fit to the Texans here at number 2. Aiden Hutchinson has been one of the best defenders in all of college football this season, and has risen to be without a doubt a top 5 prospect in the class. It's unusual to see 2 edge rushers going in the first 2 picks, but both of these guys are definitely worth it. The Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock at pick number 3, and they have to address the offensive line. Cam Robinson is the most overpaid offensive tackle in the NFL, but Evan Neal is a top 5 player in the draft class, which makes this an easy pick. The Jags have to build around Trevor Lawrence, and one of the first steps in doing that is creating a solid and reliable offensive line. That is exactly what Neal has become for Alabama. Solid and reliable. He could come to Jacksonville and potentially become an immediate starter for the Jaguars. The New York Jets are on the clock at number 4, and while they are improving, they still have a few major holes, most notably cornerback. With the way this draft has played out, the best cornerback in the class and a top 3 prospect overall, Derek Stingley Jr. is still available, which makes this an easy pick. After a historic freshman season, Stingley has struggled to stay on the field with injuries over the past couple years, but while he's played for LSU, he has been incredible and has shown signs of becoming a potential lockdown cornerback in the NFL. Stingley has the perfect size and frame for an NFL cornerback and can stay on any college football wide receiver, no matter how fast or strong they are. He's fast, explosive, and tracks the ball really well in the air. It's hard to point out many issues with his game, and if he can stay on the field, he'll be a star in the NFL. This is excellent value and would be a home run pick for the Jets. At number 5, the Philadelphia Eagles are on the clock. They acquired this pick in a trade with the Miami Dolphins in last year's draft process. A lot of people don't like Jalen Hurts as a player and believe that this pick should be a quarterback. And with Howie Roseman actually going to watch Kenny Pickett and Sam Howell play a few weeks ago, something that he doesn't traditionally do, maybe there is a possibility that the Eagles opt to replace Jalen Hurts after only 1 season as a starter. It looks like the Eagles have 3 first-round picks this year because they have their pick, the Dolphins pick, and if Carson Wentz takes a large enough percent of the snaps this season, the Colts pick will be theirs as well. But I'll get back to this topic later, because with this being such a weak quarterback class and with so many first-round picks, I think the Eagles will pass on a quarterback, at least for now. The defense, specifically the secondary, has to be addressed. The Eagles would have loved to pick Derek Stingley, but they certainly won't be disappointed in taking arguably the better player, Kyle Hamilton. Hamilton is, in my opinion, and in many others too, the second best player in the class, and the only reason I see him falling here is due to teams having bigger needs and safety being a position with lower draft value in the NFL. Nonetheless, Hamilton is an absolutely ridiculous athlete. This season he has showed off his unbelievable sideline-to-sideline skill, his fantastic ball skills, and his quite simply spectacular tackling ability. Hamilton's got a big build but is still very athletic for his size. He's fast, strong, and extremely explosive. He has the ability to read quarterbacks very well and is great in coverage. He's an interception machine, totaling 8 interceptions so far in 3 seasons with Notre Dame, and overall Hamilton just gives you everything you want out of a safety prospect. It's been years since a safety as good as Hamilton has come out of college football, so if the Eagles have the opportunity, they should absolutely bring Hamilton to Philly. The Atlanta Falcons are on the clock, and I think they need to improve their defensive line. Luckily for them, there is a versatile and exciting defensive lineman prospect in Texas A&M's DeMarvin Leal. I call him a defensive line prospect rather than just a tackle or an end because of his incredible versatility. At A&M, he's kind of been someone who lines up on the outside but can shift inside and still make a huge impact there. Leal has terrorized SEC quarterbacks for years now, and if he's there for the Falcons, it just seems like a no-brainer. The New York Giants are up next, and I'm going to be quick and straight to the point with this one. The Giants' offensive line is awful and needs to improve. It's not often we see a center go in the top 10, but when there's a center as good as Tyler Linderbaum and a team that needs offensive line help as much as the Giants do, it's just a pick that makes sense. Linderbaum is arguably the best offensive lineman in all of college football, and the former first-team All-American is a legitimate top 10 prospect in the class. What really stands out to me about Linderbaum is his athleticism. He's very quick for someone who is 289 pounds, and he will only continue to dominate college football this season, and potentially one day he will be a dominant center in the NFL. The New York Giants are immediately back on the clock because of their trade down with the Bears in last year's draft. And I know they already picked an offensive lineman with their last pick, but their offensive line is so genuinely awful that I see them going right back to it here. They have the center position locked up now with Linderbaum, so it's about time they lock up one of the guard positions right next to him with Kenyon Green from Kentucky. Green is arguably the best offensive guard in the class and could maybe one day be a starter for New York and would be a big help as they try to build up their offensive line for the future. The Washington football team is on the clock at number 9, and I know that I said that this is a very weak quarterback class because it is, but quarterbacks are always going to be picked early when it comes to the draft, and while this quarterback class is weak, that doesn't mean there isn't any talent. I do believe there are a couple solid QBs in this draft class, and Washington does need to find their franchise quarterback because Taylor Heinicke just hasn't been cutting it this season. Arguably the best quarterback in the class, and the player I think fits the best with Washington, is Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral. Corral was considered a great quarterback coming into the season, but the thing holding him back from being a potential top pick in the draft was his turnovers. Fortunately, Corral has completely cleaned that up this season. He went from tossing 14 interceptions a year ago to only having thrown 2 so far this season. Corral has tossed 16 touchdowns this season, but has also been incredible as a runner, totaling over 500 yards and 10 touchdowns on the ground this season. Corral is accurate and a great improviser. He's able to make throws under pressure and can fit passes into very tight windows. His decision-making is also good, and while his arm talent doesn't really stand out, it is still good enough. In a weak quarterback class, Corral is arguably the best option at the position, and someone I believe could become a solid player in the National Football League. At number 10, we have the Denver Broncos, and Von Miller is gone now, which means they need to find someone who can bring pressure off the edge. One of the best players available and one of the best players overall in this class is George Karlaftis from Purdue. Karlaftis was already good before the season, but has taken a significant leap this year and has become a potential top 10 prospect. Karlaftis' stats aren't necessarily anything special, but he's a perfect example of stats not telling the whole story. Karlaftis is incredibly athletic and has a big build and frame that is perfect for the NFL. Karlaftis is a really good prospect who I think would fit really well with the Broncos. The Pittsburgh Steelers are on the clock at number 11, and Big Ben is older than ever and hasn't been all too great this season. The Steelers need to get a franchise quarterback, and in a weak quarterback class, probably the biggest riser from the draft class in any position is Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh. Coming into the season, Pickett wasn't expected to be anywhere close to a top 10 pick, but after a shockingly brilliant season this year, he's found his way into the conversation. A very experienced starter for Pitt, Pickett has thrown over 30 touchdowns and 4 interceptions this season. A lot of people have compared his rise this season to Joe Burrow's from a few years ago, and I think that makes a lot of sense because Pickett's game is also quite similar to Burrow. Not the greatest arm talent, but good enough, really solid accuracy, not natural scramblers, but can take off and run when needed. Pickett gets great velocity on his passes, and lots of Pittsburgh players have described him as a great leader. Pickett and Matt Corral are really quarterback 1A and 1B for me. Both of them are really solid, and Pickett could definitely go much higher than 11. But either way, Pickett's surprising success this season has been good enough for him to be in the first round this season, and I like the idea of Pittsburgh bringing him in to be their potential next franchise quarterback. At number 12, because of the 49ers trade up in last year's draft, the Miami Dolphins are on the clock. The Dolphins have tried and tried again to find their offensive tackle of the future, but they just haven't been able to find him. I think they try again here with maybe the most versatile offensive lineman in the class, Ikem Ekwonu. Ekwonu has been ridiculously good this season and has the ability to play both offensive guard and offensive tackle, having played both positions in his time at NC State. I think the Dolphins would love to bring him in and place him at the offensive tackle position in the NFL. Next up is the Las Vegas Raiders, and there are a couple ways I could see them going here. Wide receivers is an option with the whole Henry Ruggs scenario, and maybe they try to improve their defensive line, but I think they need some linebacker help, and the star linebacker in this class is Devin Lloyd. The Utah linebacker has followed up his great 2019 campaign and solid 2020 campaign with his best season yet this year. He has done nothing but dominate all of his Pac-12 competition. Nearly 100 tackles, 6 sacks, and 3 interceptions at the linebacker position is seriously impressive, and he looks like someone to me who could be really successful in the NFL. He has everything you would want in a linebacker: tackling ability, able to bring pressure, good in coverage. Lloyd is a star and could come in immediately and help out the Raiders' defense. Next up is the Carolina Panthers at number 14, and I'm going to be honest, I think it's time to agree that Sam Darnold is not an NFL caliber quarterback. After a very solid start to the season, Darnold has just been awful, and unfortunately I do believe he should be replaced after the season. The Panthers need a new franchise quarterback, and I know they just signed Cam Newton, but it's a short-term deal for an aging quarterback who's out of his prime. The Panthers need to find a quarterback, and I think they selected Malik Willis. Willis is far and away the most polarizing quarterback in the class in my opinion. On one end, Willis has really struggled this year. It's not like he's getting too much help from his offense, but Willis has thrown a lot more interceptions this season than in previous years, and in big games, like a few weeks ago against Ole Miss, Willis struggled. Based off that, he shouldn't be a first-round pick. But last season, Willis was incredible, and he has a spectacular skill set and his potential is sky high. Willis has ridiculous arm talent and insane speed. He gets great velocity on his passes, but at times he's turnover prone and has played against such lower competition, so it's unclear whether his talent will translate to the NFL. Willis is one of my favorite prospects in the class, and I definitely believe he will be selected in the first round, but it's still so hard to know whether he'll be good in the pros. Of course, it always is, especially for quarterbacks, but it's especially difficult for Willis. I think he's really similar to Trey Lance from this year's draft. I do believe Lance is a better overall player, but their skill sets are similar and they're both coming from smaller schools. I do believe Willis will be a first round pick just because of his sky high ceiling, but we'll have to wait and see how he turns out in the NFL. Next up, the New York Jets are on the clock again because of the Jamal Adams trade a while back. The Jets have done a really good job of drafting offensive linemen early on in the draft over the past couple of years, but I think their O-line still needs improvement. Darian Kinnard is a very solid offensive lineman who has been very good for Kentucky in his time with the Wildcats. Listen, I'm not the greatest at scouting offensive linemen, but I can tell that Kinnard is definitely a very good prospect that could eventually become a very solid member of the Jets' O-line. At number 16, we have the Cleveland Browns. The Browns need some improvement at the wide receiver position after the failed Odell Beckham experiment and just a lack of production from the group that they have at the position this season. Arguably the best wide receiver in this class is Ohio State's Chris Olave. This is yet another stacked wide receiver class, just like we've seen over the past couple years. Olave has incredible speed and is a great route runner with good hands. He isn't that much of a yards after catch guy, and an issue with his game is his lack of physicality, but other than that, Olave is really all that you could want in a potential receiver prospect. His deep threat ability would fit really well into the Browns' offense, and based off the success Olave has had at the collegiate level, he could become a very solid starting receiver in the NFL. The Saints are on the clock at number 17, and they are another team that needs to improve their wide receiver group. I know Mike Thomas has and will be out for the rest of the season, but whoever plays quarterback for the Saints going forward needs to have a more reliable wide receiver target, and this class has a second-star wide receiver from Ohio State, Garrett Wilson. In fact, I actually think Garrett Wilson might be better than Chris Olave. Wilson really broke out during his sophomore season and has been one of the Big Ten's best receivers ever since. Wilson has absolutely excellent route running and creates great separation. He also has great, secure hands and is really a bit similar to Michael Thomas. I love the pairing of the two of them, and I think they could eventually develop into one of the NFL's better receiving duos. The Cincinnati Bengals are up at number 18, and they made a great pick last year when they took Jamar Chase. I didn't love the pick, but it ended up working out really well for them, but now they have to pick an offensive lineman. A lot of offensive linemen are already off the board, but with this pick, they're still able to bring in the excellent offensive tackle Charles Cross from Mississippi State. One of the best pure tackles in the class, Cross has plenty of SEC experience and is prepared to take his talent to the next level. The Bengals would be very happy to find a prospect like Cross to potentially fix their offensive line. The Philadelphia Eagles are on the clock again at number 19, this time with their own pick, and even with drafting Kyle Hamilton, they still need to improve the secondary. They've struggled to find someone real solid to go alongside Darius Slay over the past couple seasons, and their two starting cornerbacks, Darius Slay and Steven Nelson, are either getting older or have expiring contracts after the season. The Eagles need a cornerback, and luckily this is a very deep and talented cornerback class, so with this pick, Philadelphia selects Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson. This year has been a real down year for the Clemson Tigers, but at least Andrew Booth has still been very good. Booth has good length and he uses his long arms to break up and intercept a lot of passes. I also like that he's very physical and doesn't back down in any contested catch situations, even with receivers that are bigger and stronger than him. Booth's best attributes, though, may be his excellent athleticism and speed. His speed allows him to be able to cover any receiver and stop any route. Definitely a great player and another very solid defensive pick for the Eagles. The Eagles are back on the clock again because of the trade last year with the Colts. Now, like I said earlier, it's not yet confirmed that they will have this pick, but if Carson Wentz plays 75% of the snaps this year, they will get the pick. With Wentz having played about 99% of the snaps this year for the Colts, it looks about all but confirmed that this pick will end up going to Philly. So now that the Eagles have improved their lackluster secondary, I think it's time to see what other positions they can improve at. Their defensive line has struggled quite a bit this season, and Fletcher Cox has been a legendary player during his time with the Eagles, but he's getting older and he is way out of his prime. This season he just hasn't been getting to the quarterback like he has in previous years, so I like the Eagles to select star Georgia defensive tackle Jordan Davis. Davis exploded onto the scene last year and has really been the main man on an absolutely stacked Georgia defense. He's even earned a bit of Heisman hype, and even though he's almost definitely not going to win it, that's incredibly rare for an interior defensive lineman. I could even see him going in the top 10 because he's been so good this season. Davis is just a defensive monster, and I think his skill set could translate really well to the NFL. Like I said, the Eagles need help on the interior of the defensive line, and with a big, strong, talented Jordan Davis, I think it could improve immediately. And yes, this pick means that I don't think the Eagles will take a quarterback in the first round. I think Jalen Hurts has actually been very solid this year, and he's only improving every week. Maybe they'll pick a quarterback in the second or third round, but I think the first will be about building up the team with some of the best prospects in the class. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings, and they've spent so many picks on cornerbacks recently, but I still think the position isn't figured out for them. As I mentioned earlier, this is a very good cornerback class, and I really like Kaiir Elam from Florida. Elam has been one of the SEC's best cornerbacks, with 6 interceptions and a wildly impressive 20 passes defended in his past 3 years. Florida is another team that has really struggled this year, but Elam has been a standout performer. Elam is lengthy and explosive, and as a player, he reads quarterbacks and routes very well. Elam is arguably the next best cornerback in this class right behind Derek Stingley, and could come in to try and help the Vikings secondary. The New England Patriots are up next, and as much as I thought that Mac Jones would be a bust coming out of Alabama, I have to say he's proved me wrong. Mac Jones has definitely been the best quarterback out of last year's class, but now it's time to find him some really great receiving targets. The Patriots really have quite a weak group of wide receivers, but I think they could begin to fix that with Drake London from USC. London is injured at the minute, which I think will lower his draft stock at least a little bit, but before he got injured, he was the best receiver in all of college football, and at least in my opinion, the best receiver in the draft class. After the injury, I don't believe he'll be the first receiver taken, but he'll still definitely be a first-round pick. London is the definition of a big play receiver, and even when his quarterback Kedon Slovis has been incredibly disappointing this season, London was still putting up numbers that were better than almost anyone in college football. London's ability to make contested catches or catch 50-50 balls is unrivaled in this draft class. His hands are solid as can be, but that doesn't mean everything about his game is perfect. His speed is a little bit of a question mark, and sometimes he struggles when being covered in man coverage, but other than that, he is a star. Maybe not the first wide receiver off the board, but certainly one of the first. He could come into New England and potentially develop into a star receiver with his new quarterback Mac Jones leading the way. The Chargers are up at number 23, and their defensive line has been awful this year. The Chargers have a good offense and a solid pass defense, but their run defense is the worst in the NFL. There aren't any defensive tackles still on the board that should go in the first round, but the Chargers can still grab a solid edge rusher in Drake Jackson from USC. Jackson has been good as ever this season, with 5 sacks already and likely more to come. He's a monster at bringing pressure, and while his draft stock has seen a slight drop in the past couple months, he should still be a first-round pick in the draft. The Dallas Cowboys are up at number 24, and the secondary has drastically improved this season, but I think it still needs some more help, specifically the safety position. Jaquan Brisker is a very solid prospect and someone that I will definitely consider a late first-round talent. He's a solid tackler and very good in coverage, with multiple interceptions over the past few years. Brisker feels like a pretty safe option for a team like the Cowboys that needs improvement in that area, and a good pick overall. Next up is the Baltimore Ravens, and they got rid of Orlando Brown a year ago and need help on the offensive line. Of course, they brought in Alejandro Villanueva, but he's 33 and is only a short-term solution. They need to find their offensive tackle of the future, and maybe they can find that in Ohio State's Nicholas Petit-Frere. Petit-Frere is very solid and should definitely be one of the first offensive tackles to be selected. He really emerged as a star offensive tackle last season and has been great this year as well. The Ravens would be really happy to bring in an offensive tackle prospect as good as Petit-Frere late in the first round. At number 26, the Kansas City Chiefs are on the clock, and after a surprisingly awful start to the season, the Chiefs are finally playing like the team we know them as. Even if they are getting back to their old form, I think it's clear that the defense still needs improvement. The secondary hasn't been perfect, but I think that the defensive line has been the worst part, so I see them bringing in Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati. After a truly dominant season last year, Sanders has just been slightly disappointing this season, but he is still good enough to be a first-round pick. With 13 sacks over the past 3 years, Sanders has been dominant in the American Athletic Conference and should definitely be a late first-round pick in next year's draft. The Packers are on the clock at number 27, and this could definitely be a draft about building towards the future. Aaron Rodgers could be on his way out of Green Bay after the season, but with Jordan Love already on the roster, there is no way that they will select a QB. There is also a chance that Devontae Adams will leave after the season, and without a true wide receiver behind him, I see them going after that position. Treylon Burks has jumped onto the scene in a big way this year and has been a star for an improving Arkansas football team. Burks has had his best season of his career this year, closing in on 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. Burks has blazing speed and is a very good deep threat. He's also someone who you can expect to score touchdowns, with just about 15 over the past couple years. He is definitely someone who I believe should be a first-round pick, and I love the fit with Green Bay. At number 28, we have the Detroit Lions for the second time because of the Matt Stafford trade, and I know that I've said many times that the quarterback class this year is unusually poor, but Jared Goff cannot be a starter in the NFL for much longer. A lot of people think the fourth quarterback off the board will be Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati, but I'm not sure. Ridder has been inconsistent this season, and is playing in a conference where he doesn't have to face the strongest of defenses every week. Also, in a recent Ian Rappaport article, after having talked to multiple NFL general managers and executives about the upcoming quarterback class, Rappaport stated that not a lot of general managers believe that Ridder is a first-round quarterback. I don't have anything against Ridder. I believe he's a very good quarterback, but to me it looks like the next quarterback to come off the board won't be him and will instead be North Carolina's Sam Howell. This has definitely been a disappointing season for Howell, but I believe what he's doing is very impressive considering he doesn't have an incredible supporting cast around him. Howell is clearly very talented, with good arm talent and accuracy, and he's someone who tosses tons of touchdowns. In the same article that I was just talking about, Rappaport also said that Howell was most likely the fourth quarterback to come off the board after Corral, Pickett, and Willis. I know that this is a bit of a controversial pick, and a lot of people are going to like Ridder more, but in my opinion, Howell is just a little bit better suited to the NFL. The Bills are up at number 29, and they have one of the better all-around rosters in the NFL, but they really need to find Tre'Davious White a partner at cornerback. I said the exact same thing in my Thanksgiving mock draft last year, but it's true. They need to find someone who can go alongside White going forward, and Ahmad Gardner from Cincinnati is one of the better defensive players in the class overall. Gardner has 3 interceptions in each of the past 3 seasons, and has also been pretty good this season as a pass rusher with 2 sacks, and he also has a forced fumble. Gardner is someone who forces turnovers at a high level, and could be the Bills' next attempt at giving Tre'Davious White a true partner. The Buccaneers are up at number 30, and they still have one of the best all-around teams in the NFL, but with Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown both having expiring contracts after the year, I think it would be a good time to bring in a wide receiver in case either of them leave. Jahan Dotson from Penn State really broke out last season and has been incredible this year as well. His spectacular hands alone make him one of the best receivers in the country, but his athleticism and explosiveness certainly help. It definitely doesn't hurt that Dotson is a solid route runner and is very good at adjusting in the air. Just in case the Bucs lose a solid receiver this offseason, bringing in a reinforcement like Dotson wouldn't hurt one bit. The Tennessee Titans are on the clock at number 31, and realistically, they are one of the most complete teams in the NFL. Even without Derrick Henry, they still have one of the best teams in the league this year, but they have a lot of linebackers with expiring contracts after the season. Rashawn Evans, Harold Landry, and quite a few more could be on their way out of Tennessee after the season, so I've been picking up one of the most talented linebackers in the class. Nakobe Dean has been unbelievable this season, and has jumped into the first round on almost every draft board. He's really done everything this year. 4.5 sacks, 50 tackles, a forced fumble, 2 interceptions. The way he's playing right now, he probably will be taken earlier than this. Dean is a star, and if the Titans were able to get him at number 31, that would be a brilliant pick. And finally, we have the Cardinals. I just want to point out that all the playoff positions in this mock draft are not who I think would win all the playoff games. They are just based off my predicted record. This does not mean I think the Cardinals will win the Super Bowl. It doesn't mean I don't think the Cardinals will win the Super Bowl. It just means that I think their regular season record will be the best in the NFL. Getting back to the pick, as good as the Cardinals have been this year, I still think their secondary has to get better. Even though we've seen improvement from Byron Murphy, Robert Alford has an expiring contract after the year, and I just think the unit needs to improve as a whole. Luckily, as I have already said multiple times, this cornerback class is very good, so the Cardinals are able to get a very solid first-round talent, Trent McDuffie, even with the final pick of the first round. McDuffie is very athletic and is able to produce in both man and zone coverage. McDuffie is definitely someone who I think could be a very good cornerback in the NFL, and I really like the fit of the Cardinals. So that's going to be it for my Thanksgiving mock draft for the 2021 season. Don't forget to let me know who you think your team will select and who is missing from this mock draft in the comment section down below. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to leave a like and subscribe because I'm going to be making a ton of mock draft content and you don't want to miss it. Just like last year, my next mock draft will probably be out around Christmas, about a month away, so be ready for that. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next time.